By Friday, Your Grace, you will wish you had opened the letter. Clara Bennet's voice did not rise above the hush of Blackthorn Palace, yet every candlelit face turned toward her as though she had struck the marble floor with a hammer. Duke William Ashford stood beneath the royal crest, broad-shouldered in a black formal coat, one gloved hand resting beside the unopened envelope she had placed before him. Around them, the court glittered beneath 1,000 flames. Diamonds flashed at pale throats. Silk whispered across polished stone. Men who had never known hunger studied Clara's plain blue-gray gown with amused disdain, while women born to ancient names concealed their smiles behind ivory fans. William looked at the letter, then at the woman who had carried it through 6 guarded doors. She was young, perhaps 24, with chestnut hair pinned neatly beneath a modest pearl comb. No jewels marked her rank. No embroidered crest decorated her sleeves. Only a small silver watch hung from a narrow ribbon at her waist, its surface worn smooth by years of touch. "Miss Bennet," William said, his voice calm enough to freeze the room. This gathering was arranged to consider a future duchess, not to reward ambition disguised as humility. A murmur passed through the court. Clara felt it move around her like winter air slipping beneath a locked door. Her fingers tightened once, then became still. She had prepared for suspicion. She had prepared for contempt. She had not expected the weariness in his eyes. It was the look of a man who had survived too many promises to trust another. For one dangerous second, pity almost weakened her resolve. Then Lord Richard Hale shifted near the throne, and the emerald ring on his hand caught the candlelight. Clara remembered why she had come. "I am not asking for a title," she said. William's jaw hardened. "Yet you interrupted the royal selection and placed a private message before me, because no one else in this room would dare deliver it." Lady Victoria Hale stood beside her father in silver silk, beautiful and composed, already wearing the expression of a woman certain the future belonged to her. William glanced toward her, then back to Clara. "You have no estate listed in the court registry, no family sponsor, no recognized name beyond your own." Several guests laughed softly. Clara heard every sound. She also heard the old clock above the western gallery counting down the seconds. Monday evening. For days remained. "Then judge the letter," she replied, "not the woman carrying it." William did not touch the seal. "I have judged enough desperate appeals to know when one is dressed as a warning." The words landed cleanly. Publicly, a lesser woman might have pleaded. Clara only lifted her chin. "Then keep it sealed." She reached for the envelope, but William placed 2 fingers over its edge. Not to open it, only to stop her from taking it back. "You came here seeking attention," he said. "You have received it. You may leave." Silence followed, vast and elegant and cruel. Clara looked at his hand upon the letter, then into his steel-gray eyes. "Very well, Your Grace." She stepped back and offered the precise curtsy expected from a woman being dismissed. "By Friday, it will cost you everything." Somewhere behind her, a fan snapped shut. Lord Richard's expression changed for less than a heartbeat, but Clara saw it. So did the Duke. She turned and walked toward the towering doors without haste, though every gaze followed her. Outside, rain struck the palace windows in silver lines. Before the doors closed, William looked down at the blue wax seal. Pressed into it was a crescent moon above a sheaf of wheat, the mark of a family erased from the court records 20 years before. Across the hall, Lord Richard raised one finger to a waiting servant. "Follow her." The palace doors closed behind Clara with a weight that seemed to seal the judgment of the entire court. Rain silvered the broad steps beyond the portico, and the night air carried the sharp smell of wet stone and distant chimney smoke. She descended without looking back, though laughter still followed her through the carved oak as faintly as music through a wall. At the bottom of the steps, a flower girl no older than 8 stood trembling beneath a torn shawl, her basket tipped by the wind. White violets scattered across the pavement. Clara stopped. The child stared at the fine carriages waiting beneath the lamps, too frightened to approach the guests who had ignored her. Clara removed her own wool cloak and wrapped it around the girl before kneeling to gather the flowers. "You will need this more than I shall," she said. "But you will be cold, miss," the child whispered. "Only for a little while." From an upper window, William watched the exchange. He had remained in the hall after Clara departed, accepting Lady Victoria's graceful conversation while hearing none of it. Something about the quiet certainty in Clara's warning had unsettled him more than anger would have. Now he saw her standing in the rain without her cloak, arranging crushed violets as carefully as though they were jewels. A performance, Lord Richard said beside him. William had not heard the older man approach. Women without position often learn to make virtue visible. William turned from the window. You recognize the seal. Richard smiled, but only with his mouth. An old provincial mark. Nothing of consequence. Then why did your servant follow her? For the first time, a shadow entered Richard's expression. To ensure she leaves the grounds without further disturbance. William looked toward the courtyard again. Clara had vanished beyond the gates, and the servant was gone as well. Call him back. Surely your grace does not intend to indulge a threat made by an unknown woman. I intend to understand why it frightened you. Richard's smile disappeared. Across the hall, Lady Victoria lowered her eyes to hide that she had heard. Later, in the privacy of his study, William opened the court registry. Rain whispered against the leaded windows while firelight moved over shelves of dark leather. Clara Bennett's file was thin, too thin. Her place of birth had been scraped from the page. The names of her parents were missing. Even the witness signatures had been cut away with a blade. William held the damaged sheet near the lamp. The paper had yellowed evenly except where 3 narrow rectangles had been removed. Someone had not forgotten her history. Someone had erased it. A knock sounded. Captain James Carter entered, rain on his shoulders and concern in his face. The woman left the palace on foot, he said. The Hale servant followed her for nearly half a mile, then lost sight of her near St. Orizen's chapel. William closed the registry. Find out who altered this record. And the letter? James asked. William looked toward the blue wax seal resting unbroken beside his hand. Not yet. At that same hour, Clara stood beneath the cracked roof of the abandoned chapel, water slipping from her hair onto the stone floor. Behind the ruined altar, she removed 3 sealed envelopes from a hidden box. Each bore a single word in her careful hand. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. She placed the first 2 inside her satchel. Then she drew William's unopened Monday letter from beneath her dress, held it over the flame of a small candle, and watched the edges darken. By the time the last scrap became ash, footsteps had begun to echo outside the chapel door. The footsteps stopped beyond the chapel door, and Clara lowered the candle flame with 2 careful fingers until the ruined sanctuary fell into near darkness. Rain tapped through the broken roof in slow, cold drops. She waited beside the altar, listening. The latch moved once, then twice. Miss Bennet, Captain James Carter called from outside. I am alone. Clara did not answer immediately. William Ashford's closest friend had followed orders through war and winter, and loyalty, such as his, could be either a shield or a chain. She slipped the Wednesday envelope into the inner pocket of her satchel and opened the door only wide enough to see his face beneath the chapel lantern. You found me quickly, she said. The Duke asked me to learn who altered your court record. And did he ask you to learn why? James glanced past her toward the dead candle and the faint curl of smoke rising from the altar. He is beginning to. Clara stepped aside. Beginning is a dangerous place to stop. By Tuesday morning, the storm had passed, leaving Blackthorn beneath a colorless sky. William stood in the estate office surrounded by ledgers, sealed petitions, and reports from villages nearly 100 miles north. The figures were worse than he had feared. Grain reserves had fallen by half in 6 weeks. 3 storehouses were almost empty. Winter planting had failed across more than 2,000 acres, and without immediate relief, hundreds of tenant families would face hunger before the first heavy snow. Lord Richard placed a polished document upon the desk. The Hale family can provide enough grain to sustain Blackthorn until spring. William did not touch it. At what price? No price. Merely the security of an alliance already favored by the court. Lady Victoria's dowry was listed beneath the offer, large enough to repair the roads, refill the granaries, and silence every creditor before Friday. William read the final line. The engagement announcement must be made publicly at the royal session. You prepared this before yesterday, he said. Richard's expression remained smooth. Prudence is not conspiracy. Across the city, Clara and James entered a narrow warehouse office beside the river. The room smelled of damp rope, ink, and old wheat. Clara opened the Wednesday envelope and removed a list of shipment numbers copied in her own hand. These wagons were recorded as lost to flooding, she said. There was no flood. James studied the dates. All 12 shipments belonged to Blackthorn, and all 12 were redirected to private Hale warehouses. His eyes hardened. This is theft. No, theft is simple. Clara placed another paper beside the first. This was designed to create a shortage, reduce land values, and force the Duke into marriage. James followed the trail of signatures down the page. At the bottom, beneath every false order, stood the same name, William Ashford. For a long moment, neither spoke. He did not authorize these, James said. I know. Then someone copied his hand. Clara folded the papers. Someone who has studied his military orders for years. When James returned to Blackthorn Palace, William was still seated behind the same desk, Lord Richard's proposal unopened before him. James placed the copied manifests beside it. William read the first page without expression. On the second, the color left his face. That is my signature. It is a likeness of it. William looked toward the rain-dark window. If this reaches the court, I will be accused of starving my own tenants. Clara Bennet believes that is exactly what Lord Richard intends. William's gaze dropped to the sealed blue letter he still had not opened. Then he broke the wax. Inside was a single blank sheet of paper. At the bottom, in Clara's handwriting, were 7 words. You refused the truth before it spoke. William read the 7 words twice, then folded the paper with greater care than the insult deserved. Outside the study windows, Tuesday afternoon had darkened into a pale gray dusk, and the bare branches beyond the courtyard pressed against the glass like ink strokes. Captain James remained near the fire, waiting. Where is she? William asked. At the old river warehouse. William rose. Take me there. The warehouse stood less than 3 miles from the palace, hidden behind rows of shuttered shops and narrow alleys shining with rain. Clara was alone when they arrived, seated at a scarred wooden table beneath a single lamp. Her blue-gray dress had dried stiff at the hem, and the silver watch rested beside an open ledger. She did not stand when William entered. You opened the letter, she said. You made certain there was nothing inside. There was something inside. His voice was low. My pride. Clara's expression did not soften. William placed the forged manifests on the table. You knew my signature had been copied. I knew the orders were false. Why did you not bring the evidence directly to me? She looked at him for a long moment. I did. The quiet answer struck harder than accusation. Rain moved across the warehouse roof in long, uneven waves. William drew out the chair opposite her, but did not sit until she gave the smallest nod. Tell me what you want. That is the wrong question. Then give me the right one. Clara closed the ledger. Ask who profits if Blackthorn fails. Lord Richard. Partly. She turned the book toward him. Columns of grain purchases, land transfers, and unpaid debts filled the pages. The Hale family has been buying farms along your northern boundary for years. Every bad harvest lowered the price. Every delayed shipment made another family desperate enough to sell. William traced one line with his finger. These payments began before the war. Long before it. And my father approved them. Clara's hand went still beside the watch. Some of them. The air changed between them. William had expected fraud, perhaps blackmail. He had not expected his own family name to stand among the shadows. My father rebuilt Blackthorn after the famine, he said. That is what the court remembers. The court remembers what powerful men pay to preserve. Her voice remained calm, but grief moved beneath it. My father kept the original accounts. He believed your father had been deceived at first. Later, he understood the truth. Who was your father? Clara looked toward the dark river beyond the window. Daniel Bennet, senior auditor for the Blackthorn estates. William knew the name. Everyone in his childhood home had known it, though only in whispers. Daniel Bennet had been accused of falsifying royal accounts and selling information to foreign merchants. His disgrace had been used as a lesson in betrayal. He was convicted of treason, William said. He was convicted by men whose theft he discovered. You expect me to accept that without proof? Clara met his eyes. No, I expect you to do what you refused to do yesterday. Listen before you judge. William leaned back, the old scar in his shoulder tightening beneath his coat, as though memory itself had touched it. What evidence remains? Clara opened the silver watch. Beneath its inner cover lay a narrow key no longer than 2 inches. The records your father ordered destroyed were copied and hidden inside the Eastern Archive beneath Blackthorn Palace. That archive was sealed 20 years ago, which is why Richard has not found them. William looked at the key, then at her. You need my authority to enter, and you need my knowledge to know what to look for. For the first time, they understood the bargain between them. Not trust, not forgiveness. Necessity. Clara closed the watch. You rejected the woman, she said. Now decide whether you will hear the witness. Before William could answer, a carriage stopped outside. Footsteps crossed the alley. James moved toward the door, but Clara had already extinguished the lamp. In the darkness, a man's voice called from beyond the warehouse wall. By order of the Royal Council, Clara Bennett is to be taken into custody for falsifying court records. For one suspended moment, no one moved. The darkness inside the warehouse seemed to gather around Clara, William, and James, while the footsteps outside drew nearer with measured certainty. William reached for the door before James could stop him. When he opened it, four officers of the Royal Council stood beneath the rain, their dark coats shining beneath the carriage lamps. At their center was Magistrate Edward Cole, a narrow-faced man who had served Lord Richard for nearly a decade. Your Grace, Cole said with a bow that carried no warmth. We were not informed that you would be present. That is because your order was not sent to me. William held out his hand. Show it. Cole produced a folded warrant bearing the council seal. William read it once. Clara Bennett was accused of altering royal documents, entering restricted archives, and circulating false records intended to damage the reputation of the Duke of Blackthorn. The final charge was the most carefully chosen. If William defended her now, the court could claim he had been manipulated by the very woman accused of deceiving him. Clara stepped into the doorway beside him. The warrant is lawful, she said. The accusation is not. Cole looked past William. Then you may say so before the council. She will, William replied. After I examined the Eastern Archive. A flicker of unease crossed Cole's face. That archive remains sealed by royal decree. Blackthorn Palace belongs to my estate. Its restricted records belong to the crown. William folded the warrant. Then I shall request the Queen's authority before morning. Cole's eyes shifted toward Clara's satchel. We must take possession of all documents in her care. Clara removed the Wednesday envelope and gave it to James instead. These are private notes. They are evidence, Cole said. Evidence belongs before an impartial court, William answered, not in Lord Richard's private office. Rain struck the cobblestones between them. Cole understood that arresting Clara in the Duke's presence would create questions Richard did not yet wish to answer. He bowed again. Miss Bennett is ordered to appear at the council chamber tomorrow at noon. Failure to attend will be treated as an admission of guilt. When the carriage disappeared into the wet streets, Clara released the breath she had been holding. You have delayed them, she said. Not stopped them. Then we used the hours they gave us. Before dawn on Wednesday, William led Clara and James through a forgotten passage beneath Blackthorn Palace. The corridor descended nearly 40 feet below the eastern wing, where the air smelled of limestone, dust, and old paper. Clara carried the silver watch in one hand and a candle in the other. Its flame trembled whenever the underground wind moved through cracks in the walls. They reached an iron door marked with the faded Ashford crest. The narrow key turned with a soft click. Inside, shelves vanished into darkness. Ledgers lay beneath gray cloth. Sealed boxes bore dates from the famine years. William stood motionless as Clara uncovered the first volume. His father's handwriting crossed the opening page. Payments to Hale agents. Purchases of failed farms. Orders delaying grain deliveries until owners agreed to sell. He knew, William whispered. Clara watched the certainty leave his face. My father hoped he did not. William turned another page. Why protect me from this? I am not protecting you. Her voice was gentle, which made the truth harder to bear. I am giving you the chance your father denied mine. Near the back of the ledger, they found Daniel Bennett's final report. He had documented every transfer and named every official involved. Beneath his signature was a handwritten command from the former Duke Ashford. Suppress the report until the Hale alliance is secure. William closed his eyes. The father whose portrait hung above the palace staircase had not been deceived. He had chosen silence. Then James lifted a second document from the box. It was newer. The ink had not yet faded. At the bottom appeared William's forged signature, authorizing the latest missing grain shipments. Above it, in Lord Richard's hand, was a single instruction. Complete the engagement by Friday, or Blackthorn falls. The command lay between them beneath the trembling candlelight, its meaning colder than the stone chamber around them. William read the final line again, but the words did not change. Complete the engagement by Friday, or Blackthorn falls. He created the shortage, James said, then offered the cure. Clara closed the ledger and wrapped it in the gray cloth. He also created the crime that will be placed upon the Duke if the marriage fails. William looked at his father's sealed records, then at the newer forgery bearing his own name. 2 generations of Ashford power had been used as ink for the same deception. "We take everything to the Queen," he said. Clara shook her head. "Not yet. Richard controls half the council. If these documents enter the chamber without witnesses, they may disappear before sunset. Then we make copies. There is no time." Above them, the palace clock began striking 11. Clara was due before the royal council in 1 hour. The council chamber was already crowded when they arrived. Tall windows admitted a thin, colorless light that made every face appear carved from wax. Lord Richard sat near the central table, Lady Victoria beside him in pale silver, her hands folded with perfect stillness. Magistrate Cole rose as Clara entered. "Clara Bennet, you stand accused of altering court records, entering a restricted royal archive, and presenting false documents intended to damage the honor of Blackthorn." Whispering moved through the gallery. Clara stood alone beneath the crest of the crown, dressed in the same plain gown the court had mocked 2 nights before. "I deny every charge," she said. Cole lifted a page from the table. "Your handwriting appears in the copied shipment records, because I copied them from the originals. Originals no one else has seen." Lord Richard leaned forward. "A convenient claim from a woman who entered the palace under false pretenses." William stepped from the gallery. "She entered with my knowledge." Every voice ceased. Richard's expression tightened. "Your Grace, this inquiry concerns Miss Bennet. It concerns documents carrying my signature." William approached the council table and placed the forged order before them. "If her evidence is false, then she has accused me. If it is true, then someone has used my name to starve my tenants. Either way, I belong in this inquiry." Cole lowered his voice. "Your title grants immunity from examination by this council. Then I surrender it." A sound like wind passed through the chamber. Clara turned toward him, surprise breaking through her composure for the first time. Richard rose. "You cannot discard centuries of ducal privilege for the word of an unknown woman." William faced him. "I am not doing it for her word. I am doing it because privilege has already hidden too much." Cole attempted to restore order. "The Duke may place Miss Bennet under his personal protection while the council considers the matter." The offer was elegant and poisonous. If William accepted, Clara would be spared confinement, but every truth she spoke would be dismissed as the invention of a dependent woman shielded by a powerful man. William understood. So did she. "No," he said. Clara's eyes met his. "I will not turn her evidence into an act of my mercy. Record my name beside hers." Richard's calm finally cracked. "This is madness." "No," William replied. "This is accountability." Before Cole could answer, the chamber doors opened. Queen Eleanor entered without announcement, dressed in mourning black, a cane of darkwood resting in one gloved hand. The entire council rose. Her gaze moved from Clara to William, then settled upon the disputed documents. "This chamber is no longer impartial," she said. "The final inquiry will be heard before the full court on Friday morning." Richard's face emptied of color. The Queen turned to the guards. "Until then, neither accused person will leave the Eastern Tower." Clara looked toward William as the council erupted into frightened whispers. Friday was no longer merely a deadline. It had become a judgment. The Eastern Tower had once housed royal astronomers, but by Thursday night its narrow rooms held only dust, cold stone, and 2 people separated by an iron-banded door. Clara sat beside the small window in her chamber, watching rain blur the lights of the city below. Across the corridor, William paced until the floorboards answered each step with a tired creak. Neither had spoken since sunset. At last, his voice crossed the darkness. "Miss Bennet." Clara lifted her head. "Yes, Your Grace." "Do not call me that tonight." She looked toward the closed door between them. "What should I call you?" "William." The name sounded strangely human without the weight of rank around it. Clara folded her hands in her lap. "Then you may call me Clara." Silence returned, softer this time. William stopped pacing. I owe you an apology. You owe many people more than that. I know. His answer came without defense. But I must begin somewhere. Clara rested her forehead against the cold stone beside the window. An apology cannot restore my father's name. No, it cannot return the farms taken from families who trusted yours. No, it cannot make Monday disappear. William closed his eyes in the room across from her. No, but it can decide whether I repeat it. The words settled between them. Not a plea, not an excuse. A promise still too fragile to trust. Clara drew the silver watch from her pocket and opened it. Midnight approached. My father used to say that truth rarely arrives with trumpets, she said. It comes quietly, carrying records no one wished to read. Was he afraid? Every day. And he continued, every day. William sat on the floor beside his door, his back against the wood. My father taught me that our name was a fortress. I believe protecting it was the same as protecting our people. A fortress can shelter, Clara said. It can also hide what happens inside. He accepted the rebuke. Why did you trust James? Because he once refused an order that would have abandoned a village during the war. William looked up sharply. How did you know that? I read more than ledgers. A faint warmth entered her voice, then vanished. I needed witnesses who valued conscience above position. William heard the plural. Witnesses. Clara reached into the lining of her satchel and removed the Thursday envelope. The papers you saw were never my only evidence. Where is the rest? Already beyond Richard's reach. She explained that each envelope contained instructions for a different person. Wednesday had gone to James. Thursday had been delivered before her arrest to Mrs. Margaret Reed, keeper of the Royal Archives. Friday had been sent weeks earlier, sealed under a name Lord Richard would never suspect. William rose and approached his door. Who has it? Clara did not answer immediately. Below them, the tower clock began striking 1. Lady Victoria Hale. William stared into the darkness. Richard's daughter? Her mother kept letters. She knew how the grain scheme began, and she knew what happened to my father. Why would Victoria betray him? Because silence is not loyalty when it protects injustice. In another wing of the palace, Lady Victoria stood before her father's private fireplace, the Friday envelope open in her hands. Lord Richard entered behind her and saw the old letter trembling above the flames. Give that to me, he said. Victoria turned. Her face was pale, but her voice remained steady. Mother knew. Richard stopped. You do not understand what was necessary. I understand that you built my future from other people's ruin. She lowered the letter, but did not burn it. Back in the tower, William rested his hand against the door, separating him from Clara. She placed her palm against the wood from the other side, not touching him, yet close enough to feel the warmth through the grain. Tomorrow, he said, the court will hear everything. Clara watched the final minute of Thursday disappear from the silver watch. Only if Victoria chooses the truth. Far below, a carriage rolled through the palace gates. Lady Victoria stepped out carrying the Friday envelope. Friday morning arrived beneath a sky the color of pewter. By 9 o'clock, the great court chamber was filled from the marble floor to the upper gallery, every bench crowded with nobles, ministers, officers, and landowners who had come to witness the fall of Clara Bennet. She entered beside William under royal guard, wearing the same blue-gray gown in which she had first stood before them. No jewels, no crest, only the silver watch at her waist. The whispers began at once, but she did not lower her eyes. Queen Eleanor sat beneath the royal canopy, dressed in black, her expression unreadable. Lord Richard stood at the council table with Magistrate Cole and 3 sealed boxes of evidence prepared against Clara. Lady Victoria was nowhere in sight. William noticed the empty chair beside her father and felt the last certainty inside him begin to weaken. Proceed, the Queen said. Richard opened with calm precision. He presented altered registry pages, copied shipment records in Clara's hand, and the old conviction naming Daniel Bennet a traitor. This woman entered the palace under a false purpose, he declared. She forged documents, exploited the Duke's concern for his tenants, and attempted to disgrace families who have served the crown for generations. Clara listened without interruption. When Richard finished, the chamber waited for her denial. She gave none. Instead, she placed the silver watch on the table. My father was condemned because he recorded what powerful men wished forgotten, she said. I ask only that the court hear the people those records describe. Richard smiled faintly. There are no such witnesses. The doors opened. Captain James entered with an elderly wagon master named Samuel Price, who carried 12 original transport receipts. He testified that Blackthorn grain had been redirected by Hale agents to private warehouses nearly 80 miles away. Mrs. Margaret Reed followed, holding the Royal Archive ledger beneath both arms. She showed the court that William's signature had been copied from military orders stored in the palace collection. Murmurs rose. Richard's smile vanished. These documents prove nothing about Miss Bennet's father, he said. They prove only that records can be misunderstood. Then Lady Victoria appeared at the far end of the chamber. She wore no silver silk, only a simple dark dress, and in her hands rested the Friday envelope. Richard stared at her as though the room had tilted beneath him. "Victoria," he said softly. She walked past him and placed a bundle of letters before the Queen. "My mother wrote these before her death," she said. They described the grain scheme, the purchase of Blackthorn Farms, and the false testimony used against Daniel Bennett. Richard reached for her arm, then stopped beneath the gaze of the entire court. "You are confused." Victoria looked at him with tears she refused to shed. "No, father. I was protected from the truth. That is not the same thing." Queen Eleanor read the first letter, then the second. Silence spread through the chamber until even the candles seemed motionless. William stepped forward. "The Ashford name appears in these crimes as well." Every face turned toward him. "My father chose silence when duty demanded courage. I will not repeat his choice." He removed the ducal signet from his hand and placed it beside Clara's watch. "I surrender every acre acquired through these schemes. The land will be returned, and the grain reserves opened before sunset." Richard's voice broke through the stillness. "You would destroy your inheritance for her." William looked at Clara. "No, I would restore what was never mine to keep." He then turned to the court that had laughed when she first stood before them. "You called her nameless because men with titles erased her name. You called her dangerous because she carried the truth we feared to face. Clara Bennett did not disgrace this court. She gave it one final chance to deserve its honor." No one moved. No one whispered. Before the full weight of that silence, William lowered himself to one knee, not to offer marriage, but to offer accountability. Clara looked down at him, her face calm, her eyes bright with grief and something not yet forgiveness. Across the chamber, Queen Eleanor lifted the final letter. "Let the record show," she said, "that Daniel Bennett was innocent." The clock struck 10, and the entire court remained speechless. By sunset, the doors of Blackthorn's granary stood open for the first time in years. Wagons rolled north beneath a pale winter sky, carrying grain to villages that had nearly forgotten what mercy looked like. Clerks worked by lamplight to restore deeds, cancel false debts, and return farms taken under the Hale agreements. Lord Richard was removed from the council, while Magistrate Cole surrendered every record connected to the scheme. Lady Victoria left the palace quietly the following morning. Before departing, she placed her mother's final letter in Clara's hands. "She would have wanted you to keep it," Victoria said. Clara accepted the pages without triumph. "Your choice gave the truth a voice." Victoria glanced toward the eastern windows, where her father's carriage had disappeared hours earlier. "I only wish I had chosen sooner." "Most courage arrives late," Clara replied. "It still matters when it comes." Queen Eleanor restored Daniel Bennett's name to the royal register and appointed Clara to oversee the return of the northern lands. The court expected her to claim a grand residence, servants, and the privileges denied to her family. Instead, she chose a modest house near the Blackthorn villages, where the roof leaked over the kitchen and the neglected school stood less than half a mile away. William came 3 days later without a royal escort. He wore a plain dark coat, and the ducal signet was absent from his hand. Clara found him in the schoolyard lifting broken boards from the steps beside 2 tenant farmers. "You sent no announcement," she said. "I thought I had made enough announcements before asking what anyone needed." He looked tired, but the old coldness had left his face. Clara held out a brass key. "The Eastern Granary. The families will choose 3 trustees to manage it." William took the key, though she did not release it immediately. "You do not trust me with it." "Trust is not granted because a man kneels once. Then I will earn it standing." Winter settled over Blackthorn. William sold the unused hunting estate and directed the money toward restitution. He attended every land hearing, even when elderly farmers spoke of his father with anger. He did not correct them. He listened. Clara watched him become quieter in ways that no longer resembled pride. He learned the names of children in the villages. He carried account books instead of commands. He repaired the chapel roof where she had once burned the Monday letter, never asking what words had vanished in the flame. By spring, green shoots covered fields that had belonged to the Hale family only months before. The school reopened with 40 students, sunlight falling across new desks made from wood reclaimed from Blackthorn's abandoned ballroom. On the first morning, Clara found William waiting beside the gate. He held no flowers and carried no ring. "I once believed choosing a wife was my right," he said. Clara studied him beneath the soft April light. "And now I know being chosen is a privilege." The answer remained between them, honest and unadorned. Clara reached into her pocket and brought out the silver watch. Its case had been repaired, but the old scratches remained. She opened it, then placed the brass granary key in William's palm. His fingers closed around it, and hers stayed there a moment longer than duty required. "The North Storehouse needs inspecting," she said. "It is nearly 4 miles from here. Then we should leave before the rain." They walked together along the road as children's voices rose behind them. No court witnessed the beginning. No herald announced it. There was only the scent of wet earth, the sound of distant bells, and 2 people moving at the same pace for the first time. The court remembered the day Clara Bennett reclaimed her name. William remembered the quieter day she taught him that love begins where entitlement ends.